I'm really happy to be joined today by Sean Lynn. He is the president of God Squad Canada. You may have heard of that organization. It's a fantastic group. Sean, how are you doing today?
Oh, excellent. I am blessed.
That's great. I love to hear that. Well, Sean, the audience loves to hear exemplary Catholic leaders who are working in the vineyard, so to speak. And so, I'd like to begin by asking you to tell us about who you are and your faith journey. We're going to talk about God Squad and all the things that you do in your apostolate for sure today. But let's begin by the faith journey. Where did you come from in the faith? How do you practice the faith now? How is it working in your life?
Thank you. That's a loaded question. I am what you would call a cradle Catholic. I was born into the faith. I was baptized by my uncle, who was a priest at the time, and down in Lethbridge, Alberta, where my grandparents were from. My mom's side of the family, they were all Mormon, so it was interesting upbringing, and I was raised post Vatican II, so I think there was a lot of confusion, and I don't. Well, in hindsight, I didn't get the catechesis of the faith because the parents probably assumed that it was going to be taught by the schools, and because I went to Catholic school from grade 1 to 12, and during that journey, my parents did get divorced, and so I did stop going to church for a time,
Hmm.
uh, especially around high school. I met a girl, though. I was packing groceries at Woodward's food floor, for those that remember way back, and she was my cashier. And uh, long story short, we ended up getting married and having children. And we got married in a Catholic church. She played in the choir. That seemed like a good reason to go back to church at the time when I was wanting to date her, and we did probably what you would say a habitual Catholic. We got our kids baptized. We did try to do the right thing, but if it was a beautiful sunny day and Banff was calling, that would probably be something we would do rather than going to mass. We didn't have that understanding of the mass and the importance it played in our lives. I then joined the police service and was getting challenged by a coworker in classes that we worship Mary, and no, we don't do that. But I
Yes.
didn't have any answers, and my sister went and joined the Mormon faith, and I didn't have the answers. And as I worked on the streets, and you deal with a lot of different things as a police officer on the streets, and you start, what do I teach my kids? What's right and wrong? And it was through that process that my wife and I started re-examining, and we were also given these tapes: Scott Hahn conversion story, Jeff Caven's conversion story, Steve Wood conversion story, and they were fascinating. I also moved downtown Calgary as a police officer and started working with a Dutch Reform guy who had lots of questions, and he was on a journey himself. And so we would be listening to these tapes during night shift, driving around, and my wife and I, Michelle, decided that we needed to share this, and we started up a mobile bookstore called Catholic Corner, because it was so important to try and get these tapes out to people. And then we started bringing in books, and just had this beautiful mobile Catholic store that we would set up at the back of churches and conventions, and our family continued to grow as we learned more about the church's teaching on Humana Vitae, because
Yes. Yes.
we were encouraged after 3 kids that was more than enough, and I got a vasectomy, but through the grace of God, I got a reversal, and the miracle is the government paid for it. As a young constable with no money, and we had
Great.
5 more children. So it's
Oh, God bless you. You were definitely open to life.
so yeah, we've been very blessed, and our faith has continued to grow. And I started up God Squad with 3 other police officers, and putting on conferences in 1998, and it's just exploded since then. The blessings that I've received, and the faith. Even this past weekend, I was down in Melbourne, Pennsylvania. There's a retreat house there where we had the Catholic Men's Leadership Alliance meeting. Just a beautiful setting, and what a blessing to dive deep into some faith journey with other men. So
that's great. I noticed you have the ubiquitous Tim Hortons cup, which our audience in Europe and in the U.S. may not appreciate it, but Tim's is a famous place, and so I'm glad you're supporting that entity there, Sean.
It is Canadian, yes.
Yeah, that's right. It's an iconic symbol of Canada, that's for sure. So, Sean, maybe to dive a little bit deeper into the life of a policeman. You mentioned at the beginning here that you saw a lot of things, and you and I've talked before. You do see a lot of things on the street, and you wanted to teach your children right and wrong. And you met your wife, as you say, packing groceries and so on. But you became a policeman, and so what is it about the things that you see that causes you to be so clear in your faith now and so strong? Like what happened to you?
Well, it was just, you go to the domestics, you go to deal with tragedies. I'll never forget, as a young constable, telling a mom that her 14-year-old daughter was not coming home anymore because she died of a drug overdose in Vancouver, where she had been recruited as a prostitute by gang members. That changes your perception on life, and you start doing a deep examination as to, why are we here? What are we doing? Is there a God? And
yeah.
So
It's said sometimes that policemen, cops will, you bear such burdens. You see such, I guess you could say, the worst of humanity. You might see the best as well, but you probably do see the worst of it. And but you've stuck with it. If I understand correctly, you've been lifelong. That's been your career. Is this correct?
that's correct. I just retired on March 15th of this year, 2023, for whoever's listening. And then I did that for 33 and a half years. I followed in my dad's footsteps, who was a police officer. Started policing March 15th, 1962. So the team got me this picture in the back, if you could see it. I don't know.
Yes.
Of the two of us with our class pictures, and so
that's great.
Very nice.
That's great. What's the story about policemen today? Are you respected? In a cancel culture, in a defund the police culture, and all of these things that we are so painfully hearing about. What's your take on that? Is the profession respected? Is there a general belief that the police are there to help us, as I grew up with that notion?
Yes, I would have to say probably in the last 5 years, I had more people thanking me for my service and just saying thank you, I support you, than I did in my previous 25 years. Just it was amazing that the community felt the need to let us know that they still want us, love us, and support us.
That's a powerful statement. What's it like? I mean, tell us a little bit about that. I want to talk about God Squad in a moment here, but when you're every day you go out on your shift, I guess, and you are in danger, is it something that is always in the back of your mind that you could be, in danger?
Well, I guess you're aware of that, and
Yeah.
those are things that you have to settle in your soul and in your mind, and that's where faith. I can't imagine doing the job without faith. I think it would be much more difficult, but that trust in God, knowing that you're there for a purpose and you're just one of his instruments here on earth to help keep the peace, to go into those dangerous situations. I tell people, because St. Michael's the patron saint of police officers,
Yeah.
and then my very good buddy St. Joseph, terror of demons, right behind you there. He like you can go anywhere with those two with supporting
Yeah.
you.
That's right. St. Joseph is the patron saint of the Catholic CEO, and it's true, he's done things for us that would not be humanly possible. It really is amazing. I could tell you stories about that as well. So Sean, you're a policeman. You've had all of those experiences. You learned to live with the potential danger and the risk to your life. But somewhere along the way, God Squad comes into it. So how did that happen? And did that arrive and sort of arise from your work on the streets? Is that where it happened? How did this start?
Absolutely. So, as I was telling you about Jim, who was the Dutch Reform
Yes.
police officer, and his previous partner was a good Catholic guy, Dave Whitty. And I had worked with Gerard Brand, who was a young constable at the time, who was also Catholic. And we were having talks about over coffee about how we need to support the family and start praying for the family, because we were
Yes.
seeing what today's statistics are proving beyond any doubt. The breakdown of the family and the fatherlessness is in homes was resulting in the young people that we were arresting and dealing with, the prostitutes on the streets. The if they if there was more loving dads in the home, we wouldn't have half the problems we do. So we started by praying. So we were doing the scriptural rosary once a month, praying for police officers and their families and beyond at Sacred Heart. And so that grew. And then I met Steve Wood, who was part of probably my reversion. He's probably one of the reasons that we got the vasectomy reversal, because he talked hard truths, and he was the first speaker at the Family Life Conference up in Edmonton, and I got to meet him, and we helped him bring in his materials across the border. So Michelle was pregnant with our fourth child after an 8-year break. And he just loved the story, and he was starting St. Joseph's Covenant Keepers. And
Yes.
so we brought in his material for the one in Edmonton, and I brought the God Squad guys up with me to help work the table, and then we announced that we'd do the next one in Calgary, and it kind of took off from there. Steve loved our story, the fact that it was 4 police officers. Mark Shea wrote an article after that first conference, which coined us the God Squad.
Yes.
For Steve's, and then Steve had us come down to EWTN Studios and record some TV shows with him. So that's the origin story in a nutshell.
I love that story because you can get, if you tried to do the marketing thing and figure out your own name, you might have come up with God Squad, but this was honestly given to you by Mark Shea. He coined it for you, and there you are. You're the God Squad. It's the concept I could tell you that in my own life, it's been a powerful concept. Somewhere back in I would say in my teenage years, later teens, I attended with my father and my grandfather and a couple of my uncles some event with policemen. I don't know if it was called the God Squad. This would be some years back, but I remember how powerful it was to be in a room full of 200 or 300 men, five priests in the corners of the room with confession lines during the proceedings, because the confession lines were just continuous. And, listening to these stories, these testimonials, and so on, powerful experience. What is it like? What happens at one of your events?
Well, you described it like I remember the very first conference. We were in this hotel. We had no idea what we were doing, and
Mm-hmm.
but God was in control. Like there's a guy that was staying in the hotel. He comes, hey, what's happening here? And phones his wife in Midwest United States somewhere and says, "You're not going to believe what I'm doing right now." and and you
Great.
talk about the power of the confessional. The poor priest that first year, we only had two of them. Where
Mm.
Steve did some talks on pornography, and these are good men that are trying to just be good husbands and fathers. And 200 out of the 250 get up right now and go to confession after one of those talks, and we've had that year in year out, and we've been blessed the last 20 almost 25 years to Spalumbo's Sausages, which is a local
Yes, it's a
great
classic. Yeah. Hmm.
classic, and
Hmm.
the men love it because it just the good food, and we have Tim Hortons. One of the owners supplies us with coffee and donuts, and just creates a manly atmosphere for the men to get together. It's a safe place, as it were, to be challenged, because we all remember the football coach, the rugby coach, whatever, that
Hmm.
said, "Come on, you've got a little more. You've got more in you. Dig a,
Yeah.
drove you a bit." Versus the coach says, "Oh, don't worry, we're not keeping score." That's why boys quit, because they all keep score.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You've said something very powerful about the influence on, let's say, young men or boys. And we once did have such leaders in the sports field, and perhaps even in the schools. I went to a Jesuit high school back in a day, a boys' school, when it was a classic. The teachers were all classic Jesuit teachers with two or three PhDs each, and just tough men who pushed us, sometimes dragged us, I would say, into academic excellence, but leadership as men, public speaking, working on projects, doing good works for people, and so on. And we could have become, I suppose, soft, and we could have gone off the rails, but they tried to keep us in line. And for the most part, if I look back at my classmates, these are all men who have, as you have just described, they're trying to raise their families. And now they might be of an age where there's grandchildren involved, like with me. And you'd want to instill this in your grandchildren as well. So inside of a session, I remember hearing some testimonials of men. Room would be completely silent as somebody would tell a story of some kind of either an addiction or a problem or something they overcame in their life. And I can just remember how powerful that is. Do people come back to these sessions that you have? When you have one, do they come back year after year, time after time?
So we just had our 26th, and I know there's some that I don't know if they've made everyone, but there's there's guys that have come to 20 of them plus, and and that's where the excitement is that we're feeding them, but they're inviting others, and I get excited when we have the guys for the first time, and you
Yes.
hear the stories of how powerful it was for them, and that's what keeps me going, or keeps us going, is just uh, continuing to hear that we are making a difference in one person's life. Because at the end of the day, yeah, what is a successful conference, right? Is it the fact that we got 1,000 men out, or is it the fact that we changed the life of a man and his family that was headed down the wrong path?
Yeah. Yeah. I could just, understandable that you would say it that way. When you're in a session like this, you know, and 26 conferences, that means 26 years, I imagine, or maybe longer. This is volunteer work. You're not getting paid for this. I imagine maybe there's some proceeds that can buy you a flight here and there or buy materials. But Sean, this is volunteer work? And so, what's the impact of volunteer work? Is this a vocation, a second vocation?
It was for the last 26 years. I've been very blessed to be offered to get paid to do this. That's one of the reasons I retired, because I'm also with the Catholic Men's Leadership Alliance, where we're trying to set up a network of Catholic leaders doing this kind of work across North America. The goal is to have a vibrant ministry to men in every diocese in North America. So two gentlemen stepped forward and offered to pay me a wage to get this done.
Excellent. This is a real blessing, because then you can focus, as you say, you can focus directly on this, and you're not trying to juggle two jobs and your family and all the other obligations that you have in life. It's a true blessing. What do men need from this? Tell us about the state of manhood in our society. We all know that we need to be better, and we need to be more masculine and less effeminate, and we need a society where men step up. What do men need, Sean? What do they come with? What do they bring when they come to your side?
And that's where what men need is deep friendship, because I think there's an epidemic of loneliness amongst men, and also like that mentorship. Like that's why I like the Catholic CEO, like, because a CEO, if done right, should mentor his people so that they move along the continuum, so that they're ready to be the CEO someday, kind of thing, right?
Absolutely.
And that's what we were talking about this past weekend, about going deep with men and creating an atmosphere where men feel like they're not alone, that there's somebody that they can call. And I've been blessed with some great friends where you just text or call, I need some prayer, I need some help getting through this, and you know you're not alone, right? And so that's what we're trying to create for men, and just model. For me, I worked with youth at risk for 10 years, youth at risk of falling into gangs with the Calgary Police Service, and they so desperately needed a mentor or somebody to model what authentic manhood looked like.
Yeah, I can see that. At one point in my life, I did a stint in government, and I was a deputy minister of economic development. But before that, I was a deputy minister of social services in Saskatchewan, actually. And so I saw firsthand at social services the kind of situations that you're speaking about. And one of the groups that I honestly had greatest respect for was the foster parents, who would take children, sometimes apprehended off the street. You'd know it well, because you would have been part of some of those situations that I saw firsthand. They would come into the care of the state, in social services. And then what do you do when someone's been apprehended off the street? A 16-year-old comes off the street and has run away, or the parents have kicked them out. There's lots of different reasons. But then they come, and it's the foster parents group that takes them in that first night, maybe those first few nights, and even on a long-term basis. So that's a mentoring story to me. It's like parents who had children of their own, and sometimes would have 5 or 6 foster kids in their home and try to instill their values. And those are not their own children, they're somebody else's children, but they gave of themselves to try to do this. So I'm just saying that's an honorable, I think, solution to it. But here you are at the other end of that story. You're bringing those, you're finding those kids on the street maybe, and or having to pull them out of a tough situation at home, and then bringing them into the care of the state. So it's quite a powerful story.
It is, and that's where realizing every one of them's on a journey, and that they are the image and likeness of God, and
Yes.
no matter who you're dealing with, and sometimes that's really hard to see in the people I was dealing with, and it
Mm-hmm.
it's so important to reach, to open up the door for them and show them. And those foster parents are incredible people.
Yeah. What would you say, as a, you're a policeman, you're retired from that, you're now a God Squad president of God Squad Canada. What do you say to dads? What's your what or let's do this. What do you say to men in general, whether they're a parent or a young man, let's say just starting out in life, or even a teenager? What do you say to them, Sean, about how should you live? How should you govern yourself in this society where there's all these temptations and all these pulls that will take us off course? What do you say to them? What's this? Is there a simple story, a simple solution?
That's a good question. Because I'm looking to get, each individual is on their journey, and what I, especially working with young men, is finding that hook. What is it that will drive them to take a closer look at where they're at? And for the guys that I work with and on the board and God Squad, like, eye on the prize. This is where we're going,
Yes.
eye on heaven, because it's so easy to get distracted in today's world, even in the Catholic circle. Like, it's so, there's those that just are, this bishop's not doing this right, this isn't doing, like, we're slinging mud instead of the eye on the prize. We're leading men to Christ, to heaven. So
do you work with priests or the church? We know St. John Bosco and some other role models of priests who worked with men or boys, and they took them off the streets and they taught them the faith, they taught catechism, and they made men out of them, you could say. What's the role of God Squad with, let's say, the church or the priests in your own parish or in a different location?
Well, we're working with as many priests and bishops as we can right now. We had a very productive meeting with the Western Catholic bishops in February, just trying to help them understand the importance of ministry to men. And that we make that distinction. A lot of people refer to men's ministry. Well, no, we are talking specifically about ministering to men, because we're aware of men's ministry where they get together and do a pancake breakfast or whatever, which is good stuff. But we need to dig down and minister to the men, so we strengthen the man, which will strengthen the family. Strengthen the family will strengthen the church, and strengthen the church, and we will help make a difference in the world. And that's the motto for the Catholic Men's Leadership Alliance. That's their go-to. So I know locally there's lots of priests that we work with and collaborate to see what we could do to reach the men in their parish, and we're trying to help priests understand the importance of that. Because then we're creating support for them as well.
Certainly, yes. What about the role of the school system? Catholic schools or the public schools, much is said about the decline of education and the indoctrination and all these other things that you'd be quite familiar with. Um, is the school helping the school system in general? Is it helping? Or what can be, let me ask it another way, what can be done to strengthen the support and the help that a school system gives?
Well, and that's where you got to meet them where they're at too. So I actually was blessed to be part of the school resource officer for the last 3 years of my career. Prior to that, I worked a lot with the schools because of working with youth at risk. And I actually was recognized by the Alberta Catholic School Trustees with an award this past November. But just being present, like that's where being present, supportive, because I tell people, I don't know if we got builders or handyman out there, what's easier to tear down or build up? So I can tear out a deck in a matter of hours, and it's going to take me days to build a new deck for you, right?
Yes.
So we need to start building up people, and I'm excited that we've got young teachers coming in that are former CCO people, and so I see hope. And if we continue to build up men to encourage the schools to follow the right path, and it's creating a culture, right? So.
Yes. Well, and you've been speaking today about men supporting men. So when you have a conference and men are there and the priests are there hearing confessions and there's powerful talks going on and there's the challenge that is issued. I remember being at some of these where the challenge is issued. Every man needs to step up and respond to that challenge. What about the role of, in our society, men are often mocked, right? In the media, in Hollywood, men are portrayed as bumbling and foolish, and you understand that caricature. It's an incorrect caricature, but it's what's common in society. The role of women in formation of good men, like mothers, sisters, I suppose aunts, and grandmothers. Can you say something about the role of women in the formation of good men?
Well, it was interesting you talk about it was a short testimony one of the guys did this weekend where he was talking about, he was a singer, performer, he was in Vegas, and he was sitting down to looking at signing a contract for something like $2 million. But the mob he'd be beholden to the mob. And his dad said, it'll up to you, and told him pros and cons. But his mom comes in, this little Italian lady, he says, with the rosary, and says, I've been praying for you for decades, and I know you've done wrong things. I know you've done, but this you cannot do, my son. And she'd never said anything. And just the fact that loving mother is so important. And that's where it's my wife and I differ on approaches, but that helps form both our men and our daughters. So I'm blessed with 5 daughters and 3 sons, and I pray that they continue to grow in holiness and see. But I could not do any of what I do without a loving, supportive wife, and I'm still learning to try and treat her as well as St. Joseph treated the Virgin Mary. So,
oh, that's an excellent statement. I'm sure many have read some of the mystics who have insights into how the Holy Family lived and how Our Lady was, the perfect wife and mother, and how Saint Joseph, did his duty as well as a man. So that reminds me then of speaking with you about role models. certainly the Holy Family is a role model, and I'd like you to comment about that. How should we treat the Holy Family as a role model for us, and who are the other role models in our lives for men? For men,
Well, the Holy Family, like, I very much have had a very deep, close relationship with Saint Joseph for many decades now, and you it's hard as men because we have egos, and to have somebody like him to coach and mentor us, because he's a humble man that never got any recognition but
yeah,
did the will of the Father. Every time he didn't say one word in scripture that's recorded, but he did the will of God every opportunity he was given. And I know I have failed in that. That's where confession is a great redo.
yeah,
And then the Mother Mary, just that heart. So for men, if we're talking saints, there's so many, and that's where one of the questions I ask on my podcast is who's in your posse. Jeff Cavins talks about riding with your posse, and
yes,
for me, Saint Michael is a huge one because of my job. And but you look at I've used Saint Pope John Paul II even long before he was named a saint, because you look at that man who is in our lifetime. He had every reason in the world to quit, because his mom died when he was 9, his brother died when he was 18, I think, his dad died when he was 22. The Nazis invaded his country, hit him with a truck on the side of the road, left him for dead. Like, he had every reason to be pissed off at God and quit, but he didn't. Like, you want to talk about tenacity and success. Like, he was the Pope.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Amazing. So let's talk, Sean, about young men, boys. You know, at a certain, you've been a policeman. You know that inside of the head of a young boy, there can be, switches that go on and off, and they can turn onto the dark side. And sometimes, despite the very best upbringing in the very best families with the best faith formation and training and the best conditions, intact family, all that stuff, and they can still go off because we have free will, and of course we have a fallen nature as well. But is there a message? And this may be an impossible question, but what do you say to, I don't know, the 17-year-old, the 16-year-old, the 18-year-old guy who sees the world spread out before him and is enamored of it, maybe, and is starting to go off onto the dark side, off the path? What is the messaging to that? Let's say the family tries, but what would you say as the God Squad president in Canada? What do you say to that 17-year-old boy about how he should govern his life?
Come follow me. And that's where it's so important for engagement by men, especially with the younger men, because like you say, they have no fear because they of death or anything else, because their brains aren't fully formed. I coach high school rugby. I coach those guys, and just being encouraging but tough, and it's the role model that they're desperately, and the approval. That's why we have gangs. That's why because they want to be part of something bigger than themselves.
Yes.
And I want to encourage your listeners to invite these young men on the journey to be part of something bigger than themselves, is what the heart desires. And We were talking about it this weekend, and I've talked about it a number of times where, you know, okay, maybe you've done the pancake breakfast for 30 years. Allow somebody else to come in there with you and let them do it, because you've got to make room for these young men to join in the mission. Uh, and it doesn't belong to you, it belongs to God. So I remember we have a barbecue outreach trailer, so we it's one of the
Mhm.
ways that we started. What better way to attract men than with a shiny grill with meat on it? And
Yep,
there was
exactly right. Mhm.
there was a One Rock festival here in Calgary out at Mount St. Francis, and we were out there doing our Spolumbo sausages and hot dogs and hamburgers. And I had invited some young men to be part of that. And after a short time that weekend, they had basically kicked me out while I was doing other stuff. But I had other adult men, but the young men took over and allowed them to do that. What was interesting, there was one young guy that was, like you say, part of a good family, but on the edge. And he was begging his parents to come back the next day to work
Mhm. Mhm.
at making, because they see successes and are able to grow as a young man, right? I'll never forget, we were helping out a single mom with uh, 3 kids, and I think he was 14 or 15 at the time, took him with me and my boys as we were doing a deck for somebody, and taught him how to use a drill and a screwdriver and the chop saw and everything. He phoned
Yes.
his grandma that night and he goes, I got self confidence, or I learned self confidence, which I didn't know that was part of the learning that day, but it really
Yeah.
spoke to me as to
Mhm.
how important it is to allow them to learn and be part of something.
So, what came to my mind as you were speaking is the phenomenon of helicopter parents, right? Who monitor everything so closely. I was telling literally a story the other day to my grandchildren in Texas, where I am for the summer, and I have children and grandchildren here. And I was telling them about how back in the day, as young boys, we would get on our bikes, and nobody ever said to us, "You got to stay on the block," or "You can only go 3 houses down." We just roamed all over the city on our bikes. We played in the railway yards. We played in lumber yards. We did things that our parents, I'm sure, would be mortified to hear. And I'm not saying that that was a good thing that we did that. Although we never got into trouble, we learned how to cope with really some weird situations. But there was the parents were very concerned for us. Yes, they were, but they were not helicopter parents. They gave us a set of principles, and then we had to sort of live with responsibility. It was a model that I think was very successful. But are we overprotective today of our children?
Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely. One of my pet peeves is parents driving their kids to the front door of the high school to drop them off.
Yeah.
You can drop them off a block away if you're giving them a ride. They can walk. You don't have to drive into the parking lot, tie up everything to drop off your grade
Yeah.
12 student at the front door. Because how are we teaching them any coping skills? And I know so many families where they do everything for their kids and their kids never have to learn. Where my wife and I, we've tried very hard to teach our kids to be adults. Like, my,
Mm-hmm.
you're 18 now, you have the right to vote, I can give you advice, but you need to start making these decisions for yourself.
Yeah, yeah. This is, in many ways, you might call it teaching parenting skills, but at the same time, men need example. They need role models. We've talked about that. They need to know that there's a way to do this. And it has been said, I would say the anthropologist, and I'm an economist by training. So, but I have studied a little bit of anthropology, and it is said that in all societies, the ritual of men finally at a certain age, let's say age of 12, for example, taking the man from the feminine, from the mother who has been raising and influential, and then now transferring that young man to manhood in the company of other men. And they have all these different society rituals and things like that. And in our Western society, we have our rituals too. You learn to drive a car. You can go to the pub. You can go to you can vote, as you say, and so on. So there's a role for the work that you do in the God Squad. There's a role for men to form around and to sort of surround these young men and young boys, young men, guys, and help nurture them. And that's what we need to do. And so careerism or focus on sports, sitting and watching, television, I'm not criticizing that necessarily, but anything that's done out of balance at the expense of our boys, I guess you would tell me, let's not do that.
Yeah, and that's why, like God Squad, since the beginning, we've always encouraged men to bring their sons. We've even had some youth tracks over the years. So we only charge $10 for student, and that's up to and including university students, because we want the young men there learning at the side of their fathers and the other men. One of the compliments or observations was our vocation director at our 20th annual conference said four of the people in seminary were at our conference with their dads. So it's so important for young men to be there and learn with the other men.
Yeah, this is a theme that throughout this entire talk, this is coming through loud and clear. Now, Sean, we're coming to the natural end of our conversation. We could go on and on about this because there's so many powerful things here. But before we leave you, where can we find you? What's your website? Do you have events coming up? Do you have publications? Do you have what's going on in the God Squad across Canada and in the US, I suppose, that can help fathers and men? What are you guys doing?
So there's godsquad.ca. You can follow us on there. We have a newsletter that goes out monthly. We have videos, a monthly man update video quite often. We have a Dram with Friends, which I host, which is on all the podcast platforms. It's with the Catholic Men's Leadership Alliance. We have heroicmen.com, or it's an app, and it's full of content geared towards men. Catholic Men's Leadership Alliance also has a book out called No Man Left Behind, which is kind of a playbook on how to reach men. And I just picked up for Canada 10,000 prayer books for men that we want to get out into men's hands. So there's lots of resources out there. Godsquad.ca is the best way to get a hold of me. And hopefully we can, Lord willing, make a dent in this world, in men's hearts.
Well, you're certainly boldly going out there and trying, and that's the thing. And I think you are having an impact, because I recall hearing from all sorts of men who have gone to a conference like yours, and they come away changed. And that's the thing. That's what we're supposed to do. So God bless you in all of your work, Sean, and your family and everything that you do. And thanks again for being with us.